Hi, this is Melissa Schiefelbein, top traps to avoid in reinforcement. Welcome back to the Bloom Health channel. My name is Melissa Schiefelbein, board certified behavior analyst and parent of a child on the spectrum, and today we're going to talk about the top traps to avoid in reinforcement. Reinforcement sounds like a scientifically specific term, but really all it means is that you add a positive outcome to a behavior that you really want to see repeat or strengthen. We do it all the time without even thinking about it. For instance, when I post a video that you hit the like button on, hint hint, I'm likely going to keep posting similar videos because your likes are reinforcement. When my son cleans his room, I say, hey, great job, you can have an extra 5 minutes of playtime. I'm reinforcing him because I want him to know that the clean room is the behavior I want to see repeat. With that in mind, when we are working with children on the spectrum, we have to be careful on what we use as reinforcement and how we deliver it. While reinforcement is always the best practice in behavior modification and strengthening, there are definitely traps that we can fall into that tend to do us more harm than good. First trap, is it worth it? If you set up the contingency that every time your child does the behavior you want to see, they get an item or an activity that they have access to all the time, there really isn't much motivation, if any, to engage in the behavior. It's just not worth the trouble. Take Doritos, for example. If I really want my son to clean his room and I tell him that if he cleans his room, he can have Doritos, the only way that becomes a good contingency is if he doesn't get Doritos on a regular basis. If he gets Doritos all the time, it's not worth cleaning his room for them. The way to stay out of this trap is to offer reinforcers that are only limited to when the child engages in the expected behavior. If I say, if you clean your room, you can have Oreos, now we're talking. He doesn't get Oreos all the time. The access is limited and he really loves them. This is a great way to stay out of the trap because it's very motivating and he won't likely get access any other way. The second trap, choosing reinforcers without a time limit. My mind immediately goes to YouTube or iPad access on this one. These can be super powerful reinforcers, especially for kids who tend to be nonverbal and didn't get into treats or toys. In many cases, this might be your only option. That's absolutely fine, but there's a way to go about it that keeps you out of the trap. Think about this exchange. If I'm delivering YouTube or an iPad to a child with limited verbal skills, at some point I'll have to get it back, especially depending on what kind of behavior I'm reinforcing. We have to be sensitive about how much time is going to be given for the device. If a child engages in a really quick behavior, but then gets 30 minutes on an iPad, it's really tough to keep delivering that reinforcement. If every time I say, thank you, I get the iPad for a large chunk of time, then that skill is getting lost. The ratio of reinforcement is too high to really link itself to the behavior. Also, what happens when it's time to take the device back? You'll likely deal with frustration when you have to stop the video or take the iPad away. This might make it more trouble than it does help. A way out of this trap is to set very clear expectations before delivering the iPad. If you can help it, not letting the child actually hold it. If your child prefers videos, you can hold the device and press play, so that you can easily press pause or stop when the selected amount of time is up. You also could preset your device ahead of time to stop at a certain time. You also could involve timers, any way to make it very clear that the device has an end point. I also suggest trading out reinforcers. Instead of just stopping the video or taking the device, have an activity to direct the child to immediately. So it takes away focus from the fact that the device is stopping. The last trap I call, is this thing on? A lot of really critical components need to be in place for a reinforcer to be effective. First, it has to be something the child wants and doesn't get all the time. Second, it has to be easily delivered and have a clear expectation on time. But last, it has to in some way relate back to the behavior connected to it. The idea behind any reinforcer is that we want to eventually fade it out. so that the behavior itself is happening on its own without anything being added to it. This process is a lot easier when the reinforcer relates directly to the behavior. Here's an example. Let's say every time my son cleans his room, he's given 10 extra minutes of playtime at the end of the day. He doesn't get this extra time without the clean room. This evolves itself into a very naturally occurring contingency we experience every day. When you finish your mandatory tasks efficiently, you have more time for the things you want to do. That's something that nature can take care of later on in life. If I had an extravagant reinforcer, like every time he cleans his room, I buy him a new toy, that's a lot harder to fade away, and it doesn't really relate to the behavior. In fact, it might even get in the way of the behavior, because having more toys means having more to clean. You'll want to think to yourself, how can I make the reinforcer I'm adding to this situation as close to real life as possible? It might start really far-fetched, but get closer and closer as you fade it. 10 minutes of free time could transition into 10 minutes if your room is cleaned earlier than at the end of the day, 5 minutes if it's cleaned at the end of the day. Then it naturally evolves to, if you just keep your room clean, you have time to do what you like. Reinforcement can be so tricky because we have to start out heavy and fade it out. And it might seem silly to offer up rewards for skills that we want our kids to engage in, but remember that reinforcement makes it way more likely that the behavior we are trying to strengthen will actually strengthen and continue to occur. We want to use a positive approach to teach desired behaviors. It's a lot easier to teach an expectation than to continuously have to redirect from unwanted outcomes. I have way more about behavior modification coming up in the future, so don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to stay ahead of the game. I can't wait to see you next time.